Yeah, here we go. All right, here's our agenda for tonight. So we'll share who we are. We'll do a little check-in, talk about family engagement. We want to meet you all a little bit. We'll do a short case study on a Hanukkah program we're planning and show and tell a little bit about that. I'll share a planning template for inclusive events. We'll take a short break if we want to, or if not, we can skip it. Gabby will talk a little bit about communicating with your lay leaders, and then we can answer any questions. And on this slide, there's I'm gonna do slide descriptions because I'm trying to get better at that. Just in case anyone's listening to this who is, blind or has low vision, on the slide, there's a person standing in front of a whiteboard presenting our agenda, a cartoon. So thank you to the Covenant Foundation for making this training and all jkidACCESS trainings possible. I'll introduce myself first since I'm talking, but I'm an occupational therapist and I do accessibility consulting. I've worked with Jewish Learning Venture for a few years now. I can't quite remember. Someone's in the waiting room. And I work on the teen assistant program with Gabby. So I help her run that program where we train high school students to be assistants in their Hebrew schools, so that kids with disabilities can be more included and participate more in Hebrew school. But I've also been helping with programming and family engagement and all different kinds of fun Jewish Learning Venture, whole community inclusion activities. And yeah, but I'm an OT by day.
And we are thrilled to have Alana working with us. If you've done a training with her before, you know how outstanding she is. And if this is your first time working with her, you are in for a treat. I'm Gabby. I know some of you, but I don't know all of you. And I'm really thrilled that you've taken some time just to do this learning with us tonight. I am currently working as one of the interim executive directors at Jewish Learning Venture, but for many years, I have directed our whole community inclusion initiative, which focuses on making sure that kids and teens with disabilities and their families have access to everything that the Jewish community has to offer. And that includes early childhood, education, becoming B'nai Mitzvah, programs for teens, and just raising up disability awareness in our Jewish community in general. So I think it would be great if you could just take a minute in the chat box, and we see all your names, but we have some people from the Philadelphia area, some people from elsewhere. Tell us what brings you here tonight and where you're Zooming from, what part of the country, and if you want to share what your job is or just what your interest is in accessibility and inclusion, that would be awesome. So feel free to just type right into the chat box.
We had a little intro slide that I'm going to try to pull up, but this is giving me a hard time. Let's see.
Oh yes. Oh right.
Oh, this was our,
Alana, we'll do that. We'll do the check-in and then we can come back to.
Okay, so we'll do a check-in first. You want to do?
I think we should just to see
so
how everyone
we'll
is.
Check-in first, and then we'll do a little introduction. But it's fine if you already put it in the chat. I can't see the chat right now, but this is a program called Poll Everywhere, where you can sort of ask questions. You can do true and false questions. You can do multiple choice. This one is open-ended. So in order to answer this one, usually sometimes you can text it in if you're doing multiple choice or true false, but this one you have to answer on the website. So you can either on your computer, on your phone, you can go to, I'm gonna type it in for you, pollev.com/, oh, that didn't work, hang on. pollev.com/Alana Raffel, my name, 785. And then you should be able, I'm gonna go into it myself. You should be able to answer the question, which is share one word about how you're feeling today. If you're really having trouble, you try to use it. It's a cool tool, but if you're really having trouble using it, you can always put your answer in the chat. But it'll be anonymous when you put it up. We'll see if it works. So some ideas that we're getting so far, some words that we're getting so far are tired, excited, hopeful, stressed, little. I wrote a little stressed. That I made a mistake in my own. You're supposed to share one word, and I wrote a little stressed. Thanks to everyone for introducing themselves. Bernice, Natalie, Robin. It's great to meet you. Awesome. I'll give you about 10 more seconds if you want to share one word about how you're feeling today.
And Alana and I, in the trainings that we've been doing, been making sure to begin by seeing how everyone's doing today. And I think when we're on Zoom and we're not all in one room together and we don't get to see body language in the same way, it's more important than ever to take that moment out and just to like really deliberately ask people to share how they're doing, so that you as the teacher, as the facilitator, as the group leader, whatever activity you might be doing, can direct your own energy towards how people are feeling.
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to, acknowledge where we're at and make sure we're excited to be spending some time with you, and that we really care about this subject, even though it's been a little bit harder in some ways to make inclusion happen online, but we're really committed to our mission, and so we're glad you are too. Okay, thanks for participating in that. So let's see. All right, so we'll go to introductions, and we'll go back to family engagement. But so you all introduced yourselves a little bit in the chat, which is awesome. We want you to also share in the chat if you've led family engagement programs during the pandemic, and if so, what accommodations and modifications did you provide to support all families? So think about sharing whether you can say, yes, I've led family engagement programs and here's what I did, or no, I haven't, it's been too hard, or we've heard a variety of reasons that synagogues have not been able to host their normal family engagement events. So just give us a quick synopsis of whether you've been able to lead family engagement programs, and if so, how you've been providing accommodations and modifications for your participants. And on this slide, it says those questions, and also has a bunch of different little cartoon pictures of school stuff like push pins and notebooks and binders.
Alana, I just have to notice that I feel like this is our first training where we've had folks from Montreal.
Yeah, that's cool.
Buffalo, New York. We're just excited to have you
all. If you don't mind, I'm going to read a little bit out loud, just for anyone that needs to hear it. If you don't want me to read out loud, you could just type that, but as long as you're comfortable, I'll just read your responses out loud. So someone said, I personally have not led family engagement events, but our federation has done a combination of Zoom and live outdoor events when possible. I don't think they've done anything special for accommodations.
And in many ways, because this is all so new to us and we're all trying to figure out how to do everything during the pandemic, it's part of why we really wanted to do this training, because we know that there are places that just haven't thought about, well, what do we need to add online on Zoom or other platforms for providing accommodations. So we want to introduce some of that tonight.
Someone else said that they took their own initiative with a deaf Jewish person. So yeah, sometimes it just requires one person to take initiative. So that's great. I'll give about 10 more seconds and then we'll move on, but you're welcome to keep sharing a little bit about what you've been involved in, if you've been able to have family engagement programs or how you've been involved in that, or just anything about, family engagement and inclusion. We'd love to hear your experiences. So I'm going to go back a slide and just acknowledge what we mean by family engagement. So when we're talking about family engagement, we're thinking about opportunities to connect with families in both traditional and non-traditional settings. So traditional like Tat Shabbat at your synagogue, and non-traditional maybe like story time at the library. There are some challenges, especially to non-traditional settings. Like the child and activity leader may not know each other. Like the Hanukkah event we're doing this weekend, I don't think I know any of those kids. So they're not familiar with me. I'm not familiar with them. So of course, I'm going to do my best to greet them and welcome them and include them, but I may not know their specific challenges and needs. And when we do events in person, the space may not be physically accessible. It's really, in Philadelphia, it's hard to find a space that's totally accessible. So we're always trying to look for places that are, but sometimes we think of places and it's actually not, or, one entrance is, but it's not available. So there's all different kinds of things that might pop up when it's not your personal space. And, the publicity of that space or of that program might not specify whether accommodations are available. Of course, when whole community inclusion does an event, we say interpreters will be there or captions or whatever we have. But for many programs, families don't really know what will be available to them.
Alana, that reminds me, we didn't put it directly into this presentation, but one of the really simple things that we do, and I'm sure you all saw this when you registered tonight, is that we just ask on our registration forms. We provide a space just to say, are there any types of accommodations you might need to be able to participate? And we've been doing that for the last couple of years. And that's really one of those ways that we're gathering information about what people might need to participate.
Yeah. So we'll talk a little bit now about a kind of like a little case study of creating an inclusive and accessible Hanukkah program that we're doing this weekend.
That we have a lot of people coming to.
Yeah,
It seems to have struck a chord with families. I think it's the Sunday before Hanukkah and people are looking for things to do now that the weather's getting colder.
Yeah.
Lots of different things.
And on this side, there's a picture of a child lighting. Now I'm realizing a kind of weird menorah. It doesn't have enough candles. It only has 7 candles.
Yeah, look at that.
I guess that's another, I always forget, this is like a part of my Jewish education. I don't remember. I feel like there was Hanukkah. Is there a different, anyway, Hanukkah?
Yeah, it would, I guess, not be a Hanukkah. It would not be a Hanukkah.
Right. These secular websites with pictures, who knows? Anyway, so we're going to share a little bit about this Hanukkah program. So
Natalie shared a Kwanzaa menorah. Very cool.
Really? Oh, that's so funny. Okay, well,
thanks, Natalie.
That's on me then. Well, I searched Hanukkah, but that's what came up. So, whoops.
Very cool.
So some questions we considered when planning this Hanukkah program. So we thought about really how long we wanted the program to be, what tactile element we could provide families, maybe like a real object we can kind of bring it out into real life and it's not all just on screen. We thought about if we want to do a storytelling experience, what would be the best way to tell a story? What kind of craft could we do? Gabby sort of was trialing different craft activities that just sent to my home. So I could see which one do I think most kids could participate in without a lot of support. And there were some that were too complicated, or we don't want it to be too simple, too complicated. So what would be the right craft for a wide variety of ages and abilities?
And knowing that if, when we do our live programs, we might have someone like Alana, who's an OT, who can troubleshoot there with kids if we're doing a craft thing, right. Or we have teen helpers there to support kids. But this is really just families tuning in. And so we don't presume that there's going to be that, parent who necessarily has the skills to help a child.
Yeah. And then lastly, 2 more questions. How can we prepare children to know what to expect? And then how can we create a warm, welcoming, inclusive, and fun vibe? So how can we make it something people want to attend and come back to and feel like they got to participate and have their special experience? So those are some of the thoughts that are like in our brains as we're planning these events. So here's some things what we decided. We decided to make it really short this time. We made it 30 minutes. So, you know, most times when we see programming happen, it's like probably way too long for most kids. And so we decided to sort of err on the side of efficiency and making it short and sweet. I'd rather do a short program that goes really well and is fun, and the kid gets through the whole thing, and then they get to do something else.
And I think too, when we're doing programs that are in person, there's this feeling like the parents have gotten the kids there from wherever, right? They've bundled them up and gotten coats on and either walked or got them in the car. So you've got to do at least an hour, you know, to make it feel that it's worthwhile.
Yeah.
So one advantage of Zoom is to say, maybe we could just do 30 minutes.
Yeah. And I feel like families, it's a little bit easier to be, even I've had success with this, being able to be on time. And like, you know, typically if there was an event in real life, I'd be like, oh, I'll come sometime. I'll go half an hour late, whatever. Now it's like, I can get there exactly at 7 o'clock because I'm just sitting in my living room, and like, that's not hard to do. So they can actually get on at the right time. They can be there for the 30 minutes, if, you know, or however long the kid can participate. So that, you know, we wanted to make it short and sweet, and we wanted to make it successful. And like, honestly, you don't want it to be 5 minutes, but like a really short experience has more likelihood of success for most kids. So that's what we decided. We chose these Hanukkah clay kits for our craft. We had originally looked at like a dreidel creation activity. It was really 2 small pieces for kids that have difficulty with fine motor. But we decided a clay thing can be sort of upgraded and downgraded, or sort of like OT words. We can make it a little more complex for kids with more interest in fine motor stuff, or really simple and just roll out the clay into little candles. And most families, you know, even if they weren't able to sign up in time to get one of these, most families have something in their home that they can use for this, you know, some kind of dough or Play-Doh or something.
And also the kit itself was also pretty inexpensive. And we also wanted to send it directly to families' homes. I'm seeing a lot of family engagement things around where it's like show up and pick up your kit. And I was just really conscious that for families raising kids with disabilities, that might be a barrier. It might be hard to get out of the house with everything families are juggling right now. And also just knowing that, you know, a lot of kids as well as parents with disabilities are especially vulnerable to the COVID vaccine. So even if it feels comfortable for some folks to show up and pick up some supplies from someone's car trunk or something, we didn't want to assume that that was going to be good for everybody.
Right. We already sent out a visual schedule to all the families so they know what the sequence of events is going to look like. So I'm going to show it to you on the next slide so you can see it, but just so you know. And then the vibe is really, we're going to have some songs. They can use the chat, they can share, they can, after we do the clay activity, although depending on, originally when we thought we'd have like 10 families, they were all going to share their clay thing, maybe not anymore. We have our ASL interpreter, so families with, you know, a deaf or hard of hearing family member know that they're welcome no matter what. That interpreter is always there for those families. So the vibe will be welcoming, will be warm, and that's what we're doing. Anything else on that, Cap?
Well, I think the main thing is that, you know, we really will have a huge range of families who will be present, you know, so in creating these accommodations, it's not that we only want it to be for kids who might have sensory issues or attention issues or need the ASL interpreter. It's really for everyone, but the goal of putting these accommodations in place is so that hopefully it will reach all families.
So a little bit of show and tell. I'm going to show you the visual schedule we made, a short video we made for Hanukkah using a family in our community who has a deaf or hard of hearing child, and just to share some signs. And then Epic Story, which is, or I think it might be called Epic Reading, I'm not sure, which is a website where you can share your story on the screen. So you're not just like holding up your book in your little Zoom box, but they have lots of Hanukkah stories and all different kinds of things. So you can share it on your screen and show it. So I'll show you that website. So here's our visual schedule, really simple. I make these on a website called Canva, C-A-N-V-A. Lots of people use like PECS kind of images for their visual schedules. Like, I forget what the website is called, but I use Canva. I think it's really easy. I just make boxes, and I always make sure to use the picture and the word for kids who, different kids are better with visuals, different kids are better with, language. And it's like, obviously it's really simple. It's not elaborate, but it just gives you a sense of what's going to happen. A lot of kids just need to feel, I mean, we all do. That's why we do an agenda at the beginning of our presentations. It helps you feel calmer and able to participate when you know what's about to happen. So, so this will be our Hanukkah event. We'll do a welcome, a song, a story, the clay, which like this picture I found is like amazing. It's exactly like what my clay looks like.
Looks like the clay, yeah.
It's literally exactly, it's amazing. We'll do a quick dreidel activity and then we'll say goodbye. So that's our schedule.
And I emailed this to families already. Our program is on Sunday. I sent it on Monday because I know some kids might need to look at it several times during the week to mention this is something different. This is something we're going to do on Sunday. And it might be something a parent wants to even put on a child's tablet if they have it, or print out and just have around the house to show them.
Yeah, and we'll show this at the beginning of the event as well. Here's our ASL video. Let's see if it comes up.
This is brand new, hot off the press. We just got this up yesterday. And Alana, I should just mention, because everyone probably doesn't know, that all of these resources that we're creating for families are on our website. I'll just put the address in here. It's called jkidACCESS.org. You'll find this video. You'll find lots of social stories and resources for families on our jkidACCESS website.
Yeah. So on the jkidACCESS website, we have lots of different resources, but we really didn't have anything for deaf and hard of hearing families or communities that want to do more to integrate deaf and hard of hearing families. So we wanted to make a series of videos that shared some sign language for different holidays, just so kids can learn it and share it, and just to see it more. It's just not something kids see all the time. Although, of course, in our community, they do get to see it a lot because we have an interpreter at all of our events. So, so anyway, so we really wanted to make sure to use, I'm learning sign language, but I myself am not deaf or hard of hearing. So we wanted to make sure to share, authentic representation of a family who has a child who's hard of hearing, they're all learning sign. I think they're all pretty fluent now. So those are the kids you'll see in this video.
And Alana, I'm sorry, really quick. I was going to say that this is something I'm going to send several reminders to families about the program on Sunday, because we know that all of our parents are just, and myself as a parent, I can speak to it, are just, so overwhelmed and struggling to keep track of what day it is and organize things. So I'll send, a few things before them. And one of the things I'll send is this video, and encourage parents to show it to their kids to get them excited about Hanukkah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you know that some kids use sign language to communicate? They use their hands and their face to share what they're thinking or feeling, and that's how they communicate. So we have some friends that are going to show us some signs to celebrate Hanukkah. The first one is Happy Hanukkah. Check it out.
Happy Hanukkah.
Try it with me now. We do Happy Hanukkah, like the menorah. Happy Hanukkah. Next, we'll learn a sign for a food you eat on Hanukkah. Can you guess what it is? Check it out.
Or potato pancake.
So here's how you do it. You can either spell latke, L-A-T-K-E, or what's a little easier is potato, with your two fingers, potato, pancake. Potato, pancake. Our last sign is for the candle that we light each night for Hanukkah. So here's how you sign candle.
Candle.
So that's how you sign candle. You put one finger up and you flicker these fingers like the light of the candle. Can you try it? Happy Hanukkah, everybody. Bye. So
Yay, it makes me happy, Lana.
they're so cute. Yeah, so they're going to help us with a bunch of other videos. They did some Shabbat signs already, and we'll do other holidays as well. They're pretty cool. And, you know, I've been talking with the mom of that family a lot, who said there really are not a ton of resources for, you know, deaf and hard of hearing Jews. And that there's no like one plate, like there are a lot of services now, especially now that they're online, that have interpreters, but like she doesn't know where to find them really. So I think this is an area, and it sounds like Natalie that you're working on this, that really needs some more attention. So that's pretty fun. So that we're not going to show this during our Hanukkah event, but they're all getting this as a resource. That's up on the website. So that's our ASL video. And then here's Epic. So this is just a screenshot of one of the stories, but I'm going to click this link and see if I can show you.
It's really a great resource, and it's free to sign up.
Yeah, well, it was free for me with like a .org email, like a full email address. I don't know. It looks
so.
like...
I think most of the people on this
So I think almost everybody
do it.
Oh, you know what? I just have to share it on Safari because it like Chrome doesn't know my password yet.
But it's called.
You have yours up, you can show yours, but
you know what? I didn't bring mine up yet.
No worries. Here, I have it. My computer's just a little slow, but we're doing great.
Yeah.
Let's see if this works. Okay, so here's Epic. You can see it, right, Kim?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So if you just type in like Hanukkah. So slow, computer. All right, so here you can basically just like look at all of these stories. And then it does have, the one that I saw, it does have someone reading out loud, or at least the other one did. This one doesn't, I don't know if it does. So it looks like maybe some of them, there's a person reading, and some you can just read on your own. So this, it says, "It is Hanukkah, I see the gift." So this is a really basic short sentence story with pictures. So there's like a bunch of different choices here. So I was kind of impressed how much they had for Hanukkah.
I know. And what I really love about it for thinking about family engagement programs is I think it's really hard for our kids on Zoom who have visual, who have attention issues. I've tried it before I discovered Epic, to hold a book, read the story, try to hold it up in the camera. It's just very challenging.
Yeah.
And I think having these stories right up on the screen is just a game changer and can hold kids' attention so much more effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. So it looks like there's 100 plus for Hanukkah, which is pretty cool. So I haven't looked at any other holidays yet, but yeah, it's called Epic School, it looks like. And you should be able to get a free account. So it's really cool. Let me stop sharing that. Let's go back to my other screen. All right. Can you see my checklist now, Gabby?
Yeah, we're good.
So basically overall, I mean, we could have a checklist of like a million things to think about and, you know, stew on, but a couple basic things, and I'll send this, you know, a PDF or, you know, a picture of this checklist to you. But there's basically like 4 things that we're really thinking about, and among the billion other things. But we really want to think deeply about how long our event is, our pre-event material. So whether we're going to do a schedule, sometimes we do a social story ahead of an event. So a social story would be a longer narrative, similar to a schedule, but with more pictures, more narrative about, and it's usually from a first person perspective. So it would say something like, I'm going to a Hanukkah event on Zoom. I might get to do a craft. You know, it sort of says like, I don't like to be too prescriptive in my social stories, but it might say something like, if I get frustrated, I can take a break, or ask for help. So it kind of is like a little bit more of a story from the child's perspective. And we usually, you know, for events that are maybe more complicated or might be more stressful, that's something that can really be helpful for students, for kids. I think of them as students. We want to think about whether we need an ASL interpreter there. We like to have one at all of our events because we just want that to be something that families have access to across the board. But if you don't have that in your budget yet, obviously I think that's something everyone should put in their budget ASAP. But if that's not a line item in your budget yet, having at least families give you notice if they do need an interpreter, so you can hire one like 2 weeks in advance if you do need one. And then how can you make it interactive? How can you make even a Zoom event interactive for kids and feel like maybe something special, or, you know, kind of break up the monotony of Zoom life? So these are some things to think about as you plan your inclusive Zoom events.
Alana, I'm thinking, let's just hold on the checklist for 1 minute. It's so clear. I really appreciate how you created that. And let's take a pause here to see if we gave you a lot of information about how we were thinking about our upcoming program and what we're going to do. Are there any questions at this point that you can type into the chat? And we have a small enough group, we can certainly unmute. But before we go on, I just wanted to pause and see if you had any questions about that. How, you know, sort of how we're planning. So go ahead and feel free to type in the chat or unmute yourself if you have a question. Alana, you were so clear and thorough on everything.
Yeah. I'll give it a couple of seconds.
Okay.
Hello?
Hi.
Yes.
Hi, it's Natalie here. I'm in Montreal, Canada.
Nice.
And just a bit of background, I worked at the Lexington School for the Deaf for about 20 or more years.
Wow.
And so I got familiar with the, you know, American deaf community and some of the Jewish deaf community. A friend of mine is actually writing her thesis, her PhD on deaf Jews in New York.
Wow.
In the 19th century, turn of the century.
Wow.
And I'm an interpreter for the deaf, and I'm also an educator. I got my teacher's certification at NYU in special education with a minor in deaf ed.
Nice.
And I'm also an interpreter from LaGuardia College. I got my, you know, all my training in the United States. Yay, America. And I came back to Montreal with all this knowledge, and I have to tell you, I was quite disappointed in the resources compared to the United States, where it's much more progressive and for hard of hearing and deaf people. So what I've been doing in Montreal basically is I was an interpreter at school mainstream, which I did not like compared to Lexington School for the Deaf, but I did it, and also an interpreter. But on the side, I have a strong Jewish background. So I was asked by synagogues to do an ASL Shabbat in sign language because I also have singing and musical background. So I combine my sort of skills, and I did a bit of training in New York with Naomi Brudelmeyer. Can't remember now her name, but anyway, she's a well-known interpreter in New York, and she was doing ASL for Shabbat services at B'nai Jeshurun in New York City.
Yeah.
And what I've been doing is I've been collecting over the last year or so books that are written by American authors that have a Jewish deaf character, and there happens to be one which is a great resource, which you're probably aware of, Nathan Blows Out the Hanukkah Candles by Tammy Wiltzig and Nicole Katzman, and it's about a boy who, you know, his family's on the cover, and he's on the autism spectrum. So they have for autism, they have another one for a boy who's also blind for, I think, Purim. I mean, there's maybe, I can count on my hand how many there are with Jewish deaf kids with disabilities. However, that being said, there's very few that have a deaf Jewish child as a central character. I know Jennifer Rosner, I have her books, wrote a couple of books, The Mitten String, and another book. I know that Shelley Christensen, who I met in Montreal, she came, she's fabulous, did a workshop here. And she used that book at one of, I don't know, some Jewish Public Library in the US or somewhere for Jewish Disability Awareness and Inclusion Month, JDAIM, which we have here in Montreal as well, which is great. But I noticed there was a lack of, Jewish identity for that, special February month. So what I've done is I've created curriculum plans, storytelling. I went to all my resources. A lot of them are American resources, which are excellent and are out there and open and willing to share. And I'm creating programs. But what happened with COVID, our community now is isolated. I just wrote an article for Inspirations, which is a disability newspaper in Montreal, about a deaf gentleman that I was working with on a weekly basis, who is Jewish, and I taught him a lot of his Jewish heritage. We went over ASL, which he forgot, which now he's like using more, and he really enjoys Hanukkah, Purim, all the holidays. And I found content for him because he's a Jewish deaf adult, with the themes of the Jewish holidays, but I, interpret for him and do, activities like the idea of what you're doing. So I see myself, yes, as an ASL interpreter, but more as a facilitator using sign language to educate, kids, to give them, total communication or, more communication, more involvement, using ASL as a tool rather than I'm standing there, blah, 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 interpreting what a hearing person is saying and the kids are not getting much out of it, or an adult who has a cognitive disability. So, I love what you're saying. I love that you exist. I sort of stumbled on you by chance because I was really on the internet a lot trying to find out. There's got to be some, group that works with people, children with, who are Jewish with disabilities, and in a different, bringing a different perspective or helping. So it's very helpful.
Well, Natalie, now that we're connected, and this goes for everyone here, we're a resource for you. One of the, so your work sounds amazing. We're thrilled you're here. And to say to everyone, one of the silver linings we've discovered in this very hard time during the pandemic is we've been doing way more of our training and our programs online, and we'll continue to do that in the future because it's so great to reach everyone. And I think, we talk a lot about these principles. If you look at Alana's checklist, it's certainly something, although we're focused on family engagement, we're not defining families. These could be programs for adults with cognitive disabilities, for families who have teens, for kids. These are really sort of universal principles, I think.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I'm really excited about the work you're doing, and we'd love to connect more. So that's great.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Right.
That would be great.
We'll keep going here. I can't believe it's Alana. We're doing great.
I was going to say, as long as you're okay with it, obviously, I say this to everyone, you get up and take your breaks as you need to. You go to the bathroom, you get a snack, you stretch, but as long as, I think we'll keep moving through the break because I do want to get you out on time.
But Alana, that again is also a great principle just to announce. If this was a 2-hour thing, we would take a break, but just if you need to do what you've got to do.
Yeah, and I'm of the persuasion that I don't mind when people shut their cameras off. Like, with my students, if my kids are like, I can't have my camera on right now, it's like overstimulating or whatever, I'm like, cool, sounds good. I know some teachers aren't so into that, but I'm okay with people shutting their camera, doing whatever you need to do in your own home. That's cool with me. So take a break if you need to. But otherwise, I'll let Gabby chat a little bit about communicating with your lay leaders.
Awesome. So we wanted to, in addition to sharing the kind of work we're doing right now, thinking about our family engagement programs during the pandemic, we wanted to touch on this topic because we got some feedback earlier with our first jkidACCESS program that one of the struggles people felt was that, they as professionals really got this, but that the people who were working with them, whether board members or education committee chairs or their PTO president, if it was a preschool or something, didn't necessarily understand their inclusion and accessibility goals. And so I wanted to think a little bit about how we communicate Because if you're in a professional role, it's really important to bring those lay leaders into a team mindset with you. So I think we want to begin by just communicating with our lay leaders, with our committees, about why inclusion is so essential. A lot of people are surprised and simply don't know, because it's, disability is not talked about often enough in our society. But it's really 1 in 5 families who are impacted by disability in some way. And those of us here, many of us, I'm sure, have disabilities. Some are visible, some are invisible. In that 1 in 5, it could be someone with a learning disability, a developmental disability, some kind of physical disability, a mental health condition, any combination of these disabilities. But we know that that's 1 in 5, or, if we think of a program we have, maybe if there are 100 kids in the program and we do the math, it's a significant amount of our kids. And when we think about engaging the whole family, it's not only that child who has a disability, but it's whether there's access for the parents of that child, for the siblings of that child, for the grandparents of that child. If you create that wonderful Tot Shabbat program that has these inclusive measures, and certainly when we're live in person, we think about things like creating a quiet or a calming room, having that visual schedule available, all the things that can create an accessible program, but that then the whole family can come. So the parent is there with all of the children, or the grandparents are coming to bring the child. And when the program isn't inclusive, now suddenly, you've lost all those members of the family who can't participate. So I think these are some of the strategies that, and some of the, frankly, statistics that are really important to share with your lay leaders and all the people that you're working with.
Yeah, and I'll just add a quick description of this slide. There are 2 pictures. One is, it says 1 in 5 families, and it's a family gathered around what I think is a menorah, but who knows these days. And the other picture is a young child being kissed on both cheeks by grandparents, and it says siblings, parents, and grandparents. Let's see here. Oh. Here's just your reminder that I always, should be shared with lay leaders and professionals, that other Jewish places are becoming more and more inclusive and accessible, and you don't want to get left behind. Sometimes I use that competition element when I'm working with like theaters and museums and stores and restaurants. I'm like, other restaurants are getting a temporary ramp, or other theaters are taking, getting interpreters. So I don't think you want to be left behind. So, and sometimes like I'm down to make it sound competitive if that gets it going. But you want to be on the forefront of it, right? You want to be in the beginning, or I mean, it's not even the beginning anymore, 30 years after the ADA, but you want to be maybe the first one to commit to having an interpreter at every event, or the first one to make sure the BIMA is completely accessible. So just always a helpful reminder to synagogues and organizations. Do you want to break up, or do you want to just do this as a group?
What do you think, Alana?
I'll just pull it up.
Okay. So one of the ways that I think it's really important to talk about inclusion with your lay leaders is actually going back to the sources, going back to our Jewish texts. And there's so many rich texts. I actually, on this sheet, which we'll send you this, and a PDF of the slides as well. But, I think that many of us, as Alana just talked about the ADA being 30 years ago and all the changes we've seen in our society, around disability inclusion in the last 40 years, 30 years, even the last decade. But in our Jewish tradition, these are really ancient discussions that we've been having for thousands of years about really the essence of it, of valuing every human being, right? And that's at the core of what Judaism is, that every life is holy, every life is sacred, every soul, every person is born with a soul, and whether you're struggling with a disability of some kind or not, all human beings have challenges. And so I will do text study a lot when I want to talk about the importance of inclusion as it relates to our Jewish community, because we have so many great texts that can really lead us there. So on this sheet, I just picked a few that you could use with lay leaders. You know, from Moses, our greatest prophet, who himself had a disability, to this idea that human beings all, you know, are created equally, that, you know, the concept of B'Tselem Elohim. So these are some texts that we'll send you that you could use as a text study, as a discussion, and really, again, to communicate with your team, with your inclusion team, that this is not only a thing that we're doing now because it's something our society is becoming aware of, but in our Jewish tradition, we've been talking about the value of inclusion for as long as we've had the Torah. Alana, anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, no, that's great. I love it. Yeah, and we'll definitely send this out. I'm sure some of these things are, you know, I feel like there's like classic disability examples in Jewish texts, like the I actually don't think you have this one here, like
yeah, I didn't add the stumbling block.
But so some of these, you know, it's kind of nice to bring up a new one every once in a while, because we can't keep using the stumbling block every time. But yeah, I mean, you're right, Gal. Like, even it feels like I sometimes complain about, like, God, the ADA was 30 years ago. Like, you know, stores and businesses and restaurants, I got to get it together. But then I'm like, no, this is like way before the ADA, and some synagogues are still not living up to it. So it does kind of put it in perspective.
Yeah.
And if you guys have any other favorite disability related Jewish texts, we always love reading more. So feel free to email them to us or put them in the chat if you have quick access to them.
And Anna has a great question that we'll get to in just a moment.
Perfect. We're almost at questions. Great timing. So just our last thought here is that really the goal is for inclusion to be a part of all program planning. You know, I sometimes say, like, special education is good education, right? Like, being able to, you know, create programming that is specific to what students need, being able to accommodate students, like, that's just really good education. And I kind of feel that way about inclusion planning. Like, that's just planning a good event. Being a good planner, being someone who sends out materials ahead of time and has all kinds of resources and options and gives people breaks when they need them. And, like, that's just a good event. And thinking about inclusion in a way that's, like, not specific to kids, it's not specific to any particular thing. It's really just should be a piece of everything that we do all the time. And of course, that's easier said than done. And it's easier for us folks who think about these things constantly. And it's really the big challenge, I think, is getting, and like I truly feel like the big challenge of my life is getting other people to think the way that I do about all of this stuff. You know, like, it's part of my daily life, and I want it to be part of everyone's daily life to some extent. And so that challenge of getting everyone to think that way a little bit more is just kind of the big mission of my life. So I'm sure you all kind of feel the same way.
Alana, this is perfect timing. I want to just, if you want to go to the slide with questions. So first of all, Bernice, I want to thank you for your comment. I do agree that watching, you know, we're all watching press conferences more than ever between the election and the COVID updates and everything, and seeing those interpreters present is so educational. I think I was sharing with you, Alana, when I was watching one of the memorial services for George Floyd, how amazing it was watching the interpreter share the emotion of the speakers and how profound that was. But Anna, I want to let you know that our whole community inclusion initiative at Jewish Learning Venture has done a lot of work around bar and bat mitzvah. We actually do a training. We'll probably do it again next summer for tutors and for clergy who prepare kids for b'nai mitzvah. We've thought about this a lot. There are all kinds of options, and I will send a couple of articles with our slides and with the text that we did tonight. That again is kind of the same type of principle as what we were talking about tonight with our family engagement programming. What are the accommodations that a child might need? You know, so a child might need a shorter service, a less crowded sanctuary, a shorter Torah portion, to learn in a different way. Maybe they're an auditory learner who's going to memorize it. Maybe they're going to need a certain kind of color coding, you know, whatever the process might be. So I think what we've seen and what we've really promoted out in our greater Philadelphia area is that just use your imagination. There are all kinds of possibilities. I'm the mom of 2 kids, and my oldest, who's almost 18, became bar mitzvah actually on his 13th birthday. He has autism and an intellectual disability. And I'll send out some articles I wrote about how we created his bar mitzvah, which was really, really cool because he has definitely a finite amount of attention that he's able to be in service. So the whole thing was an hour, and I worked very closely with our rabbi. It was on a Monday morning, which, as I said, happened to be his 13th birthday. That was much better for him than being in a Shabbat service where we can control the length of the service and the crowd. And so we set up a lot of accommodations. He's also non-speaking. He uses an iPad to communicate, and he does sing a little bit. He sang the Shema. We had programmed buttons on his iPad to be able to push for the Aliyah blessing. So he participated in a number of different ways, but it was definitely a service designed for him.
That sounds absolutely beautiful and really inspiring. I'm like choking up just hearing about it.
Thanks, Anna. It really was. I think this whole conversation is just really, like Alana said, like she just thinks this way. Like, oh, what are the possibilities? What accommodations might someone need to be able to fully participate in Jewish life, right? And when we have that mindset, like I said, whether it's a program for young children or adults or a life cycle event, we can make it happen.
That's a really great approach. Yeah, I'm here. I'll just quickly, as a mom of one child who's autistic, and I'm also here as a Hebrew school teacher, and just kind of a few steps behind you, saying, okay, well, how do I advocate for my child to participate fully in a Jewish program?
Yeah, that's awesome, Anna, that you have both of those hats. And how old is your child, if I may?
He's 5.
Yeah. Got it. Oh, yeah. So you're at the beginning of that road. So yeah, we'll send out some material. And as Alana shared earlier, we're thrilled that because of the pandemic and us doing programs online, that we're meeting people from all over, and we are really delighted to be a resource for everybody.
Wonderful. I also, as a shameless plug, I'm also a Jewish storyteller and puppeteer, and my shows are really sensory friendly, and I have a lot of upcoming shows that are online, and they're sort of a nice thing to introduce a child to an upcoming holiday. So
Anna, can you put your website or
Sure.
or however people can reach you in the chat box?
No problem. Yeah.
And then we'll send that out with our notes.
Oh, thanks.
Cool. I know we have 2 minutes left and I want to respect your time. I'm going to put we have a really short survey that I'm going to put in the chat. But if you have any other questions, please feel free, either put them in the chat or you can unmute yourself and say them out loud. Of course, always feel free to email us. I think you should have we'll send all this stuff out to you so you'll have our contact information. But if there's anything else you want to talk about or share or ask, we're here for the next 2 minutes.
Alana, I love how we magically kept
You always do that.
time. We're pretty good. We're pretty good with that. But yes, if you can do the short survey now, that's awesome. And if not, we'll also send that in our follow-up tomorrow so that you've got it.
And no pressure to, if you want to take a minutes now and just do it real quick, that'd be great. But if not, you can do it when you have some time. You
were all a terrific group. Yeah, it really, we had a number of people who, for different reasons, couldn't be here live, but are going to be watching the recording. But I really like all of your comments and questions were just so thoughtful. It was great having you all here tonight.
Yeah, thank you. Happy almost Hanukkah.
Yes.
We're in December, I guess.
Yeah, it's December 1st, right? I will stop recording now.